Welcome to the Bronx County Historical Society's Oral History Projects. I am Pastor Crespo Jr., the Research Librarian and Archivist for the Bronx County Historical Society. Today is March 10th, 2025, and I am joined by Gary Drucker. Gary, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Gary Drucker. I live in Connecticut, Hamden, Connecticut. I was born in the Bronx in 1955, lived in the Bronx through 1977, and then spent a few years in upstate New York and eventually settled in Hamden, Connecticut since 1986. Married, beautiful wife Marge, 2 children who are grown, 3 grandchildren who are, one is 8, one is 7, the other is 3, and I'm now retired. I worked for many years as in the pharmaceutical industry for a company called Bayer, which is a German pharmaceutical company. Before that, I worked on doing fishery studies in the Hudson River for 10 years.
Great. And so, what neighborhood are you originally from, Gary?
I'm from kind of the eastern part of the concourse between 167th Street and 161st Street, and I like to say near that famous ballpark in the Bronx, Yankee Stadium.
All right, great. And we like to find out during these interviews where your parents are from.
Yeah, so my parents were born in the United States. I believe one in Manhattan and the other one in Brooklyn. I'm not 100% sure about that, but they were born in New York.
Okay, all right. And how'd they end up in the Bronx?
My father, I believe, moved from Brooklyn to the Bronx. I'm not sure why, but he did settle in the Bronx. He was actually a plumber who he belonged to Local 2 Union, which is actually in Brooklyn. So that's where he was originally started, being a journeyman plumber. My mother with her parents, had a candy store in the northeast Manhattan. And they, I think when my grandfather passed away, my mother and her mother moved to the Bronx, and my grandmother eventually wound up working in a bakery in the Bronx. And so they were both eventually, although they started in other boroughs, wound up in the Bronx.
All right. Can you describe your neighborhood as a young child growing up?
Yes, I can. So I lived the address was 1011 Sheridan Avenue, which was 1 block off the concourse. I mention the concourse because people generally know that as the main thoroughfare through the Bronx, running north and south, and Sheridan Avenue actually paralleled it. So I had remember a great childhood growing up in the Bronx. I had many friends, and we went to the same school for the most part. Not everyone, but most of us went. Also along Sheridan Avenue, a few blocks north, was PS 90. That's where I went through 1 through 5, I believe, kindergarten through 5. Being around the neighborhood, we did all sorts of sports that we either were familiar with or created, one of which was stickball. Of course, that was a famous sport that was played in the Bronx. Well, not only the Bronx, probably all the boroughs. Played a lot of stickball, played a game called Ring Alivio, which is a game where you kind of disperse and then another team has to kind of find you. We played another game called Spud, which was based on numbers, called out your number. Person threw up a ball, if your number was called, you had to run over and catch it. Then you can call the next guy's number. We also played Skelly, which is a game which is drawn on the ground with chalk, also a number-based game. And you used a bottle cap filled with substance that you could melt, and then you would weight down the bottle cap, and you would hit the bottle cap with your finger and try to go around all the numbers that were sketched out. It was candle wax. That's what I was trying to think of. Candle wax was what you filled the bottle cap with, and we'd go around. We'd also play a game called Off the Point, which you'd use a Spalding ball, and on the side of the building, there would be kind of a little bit of a push out, if you will, with a point on it. And you'd take the ball and you'd try to hit the ball off the point, and then the ball would go into the air, and the other team would try to catch it or not. We also played a game called Buck Buck, where one guy would lean up against the wall, 3 or 4 other guys would kind of make a daisy chain, if you will, in front of him, and then the other team would run and jump on top and try to get that to fall down. It's kind of a rough kind of game, but that's what we did. We also played war games where we were soldiers in the backyard, and we had to defend ourselves, and we had girls with us who at that time were the nurses, and we'd go all through, because we had a really nice yard. Not really, it wasn't a grassy yard, it was a yard in the back where we can kind of make things up and play along with each other. I also did a lot of activities in Joyce Kilmer Park. Joyce Kilmer runs along the concourse, and the one side of it is 161st Street and the concourse. And it was big open fields there. We played football. I can remember playing football when it was snowing a lot. There were fountains there that were sometimes on, sometimes off, and we'd climb the fountains. Probably was not something you would want to do or lawful, but we did it anyway. And just sometimes as I got older, just visiting the park and sitting with the family. I can also remember times where the concourse was during snowstorms, was just completely stopped. There was no cars. I don't remember what year that was, but there was at least once or twice major snowstorms, and we used to go and play on the snowstorms, on the roads during the snowstorms, which of course you're not supposed to do when there's cars there, but there weren't any cars at that point. There was also a time where we did sledding. There was a big hill right alongside our house, 1011 Sheridan Avenue. It was 1011, it might have been 1011 Morris, I think. Although Morris, I know, was further down. Anyhow, it was a big hill run alongside a church, and 1011, whatever the name of the street was, and it was very steep, and it was a little bit dangerous because once you came down the hill, you would cross Sheridan Avenue, and if there were any cars coming, it could be a big problem. So I had a lot of fun with my friends in the neighborhood doing all these things.
Got it. So you grew up in the 60s.
Yes. Yeah. I lived in 1011 Sheridan Avenue from when I was born, 55 through 69. Yes.
What was the neighborhood like in the 60s? Demographics, communities?
Yeah, it was heavily Jewish. I'm Jewish. Heavily Jewish. Some Italians, less so. So, but as time went on, getting towards the 70s and the late 60s, it changed.
Okay.
The neighborhood became much more Hispanic, and some African Americans, but mainly Hispanic. And, to be honest, I didn't feel all that comfortable, not because I had anything against Hispanic people, it was just a change. It was just not as familiar as it had been in the past. The buildings were still the same, certainly, but my friends, a lot of them moved out, and I didn't have as many friends. I remember it was one, after a while, it was really just one friend. My friend Ricky Kaplan lived in the same building on the same side. The building was split up, and he was 1 or 2 floors up, and we spent a lot of time together. And actually what we used to do a lot of, and he was a little guy and I'm pretty tall, we played basketball in my bedroom. We would cut out a shoebox with a hole and a Spalding and just play basketball for hours and hours and hours in my bedroom. And that's kind of the last friend that, like I said, real friend that I had before we moved, because in 1969, we moved to Co-op City.
Okay.
So.
All right. So, wow. So 1969, you at least went to middle school in the neighborhood?
Okay. So I went to high school.
Okay.
Yeah. So I originally was in PS 90, as I mentioned. Then I was in junior high school, 22, which was on Morris Avenue. Then I went to Taft, which is also on Sheridan Avenue, further up towards 170th Street. And I believe it was the middle of my sophomore year that, it might have been my junior year, that we moved. But I didn't want to change schools. So what I did was I actually commuted from Co-op City to Taft. I would take the bus along Gun Hill Road, and then I would hook up with the D train on a concourse and take the D train all the way to the school at 170th Street. And I did that, like I said, either for 2.5 years or 1.5 years. I don't remember whether my sophomore year or my junior year. But that was a hike. It took me a good hour and a half each way, each day, to get to school. But I was determined. I guess I did have friends in high school that I wanted to stay around, and eventually they moved out also. But it was a hike. But I did it, and I finally graduated in 1972.
What was your apartment like on Sheridan Avenue?
Yeah, okay. So the apartment, like I said, the building was split up. You walked in, it was nice, it was beautiful vestibule. And you go to one side and there was an elevator, another side there was an elevator. We were on the left, and we were on the second floor, apartment B9. When you walked in the apartment, there was a little hallway, very little hallway. Then you walked into the kitchen. It was a galley kitchen. One thing I do remember, there was a washing machine in the kitchen, so we were able to wash our clothes. But in order to dry the clothes, you had to go downstairs to where there's a bunch of dryers, and at night, walking through the hallway and then down through the vestibule was sometimes not that friendly, but I did it. You walk through, and then you continued in. There was a dinette, a small dining area. I had a sister and a brother, and it was only 2 bedrooms, so that actually we converted that into a bedroom for my sister. So that's where her bedroom was. Then if you walk to the left, there was another area where we actually set up the dining room, and then there was a living room off of that. And then there was a long hallway. There was a big bedroom my brother and I shared. He was 10 years older than I. And then straight down was my mother and father's bedroom, and then there was one bathroom that we all shared alongside, then a closet, a couple of closets, and so on. So it was pretty tight.
Okay. What were meals like? Can you describe one of your favorite meals at home?
Yeah. Well, I guess my favorite meal was probably, my mother used to make lamb chops. And I really, for some reason, I really liked them. So that was definitely memorable. Always, we were a big pasta, even though we were Italian. Not that that means anything, but you eat a lot of pasta. Holiday meals were always memorable on the New Year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, around the New Year, and Passover. We had the family come to visit. One thing I also wanted to mention, I went to become what they call bar mitzvah in the Jewish religion with 13-year-olds, a big ceremony. I went to the Young Israel of the Concourse. My parents were not members, but I did go to the Hebrew school there to learn Hebrew and learn my portion in what I have to read from the Torah. But what's interesting now, that building is now the Bronx Museum. It's on the corner of 165th Street and the Concourse. And I've been there. It's a little bit weird because it used to be a big, beautiful synagogue. But now it's a museum, a nice museum, not like an art museum. So That's an interesting tidbit. I'm not sure when they took it down, but probably within the last 15 years, I would think it came down to be the museum.
Okay. What kind of... Did you have any musical influences at home? What kind of music were you listening to at home in the 60s? And is it the same at home as outside?
Yeah. My sister, to a lesser degree, my brother. My sister was really into music. She wasn't a singer or musician or anything, but a lot of Motown. Yeah, definitely a lot of Motown. And my brother seemed to like African music. I remember hearing some African albums at the time. Other than that, I don't know much about what my brother liked, to be honest. But my sister was definitely into Motown, and I liked it also. And as time went on, as I got older, it was more rock and roll and Harry Chapin and James Taylor and a lot of the Beatles, of course, which I wasn't crazy about, but I would listen to Elton John and some of the other, British performers that got real famous. But in the early years, what I remember was like the Supremes and Marvin Gaye and the Four Tops and the Temptations. My sister loved the Four Tops.
Okay.
I remember that.
Got it. And back to your high school.
Yeah.
Any mentors or teachers that stick out?
I wouldn't call any of them mentors, really,
Okay.
but I do remember Mrs. Shapiro. She was an English teacher, and I liked her, and she just stuck out in my mind. But I wouldn't call any of them a mentor. The other one, maybe the other teacher I remember was Miss Perman, who was my biology teacher, and I eventually wound up studying biology in college. So I guess maybe indirectly, maybe she was a mentor. She was a very good teacher. The other teacher I remember, I'm not sure it was high school or junior high school. We had a math teacher from the West Indies, and this guy was the toughest teacher you've ever seen. I forget his name, but he was, like I said, from the West Indies because he had an accent. That's how I knew. But you had to sit upright and listen, and if you said a word in his classroom, he'd just throw you out. You're out. You just pack it. And he would say, I remember the quote was, "Pack up your bags, you're out." And then you just roam the halls or go to the principal or something, but he really stuck out in my mind. The other teacher I remember, now that I'm thinking about it, is Mr. Slotkin. And I remember him kind of not in such a nice way, because I remember there was a kid that sat in front of me who was blind. And I tried to help him as best I can when I could, but Mr. Slotkin did not treat him very nicely. But that bothered me, to be honest. It wasn't nice. But, it is what it is, and people are who they are. So.
Any dances or events in the neighborhood you would go to in school?
Not really. No, I was not. I wouldn't call myself an introvert, but I was not an extrovert, if you know what I mean.
Right.
I was somewhere in between, so I was not into that sort of thing. And actually, my high school, again, as time went on, the same thing kind of happened that happened to the neighborhood. The white kids or Caucasian kids left, and it became a very, very heavy African American school. And again, I don't have anything against African Americans, but I just did not feel that comfortable. Mm-hmm. And the clique of people that I hung out with, if you will, got smaller and smaller, and that's who I basically hung out with until I graduated. So any of the activities were, dominated by African American kids, and like I said, I didn't feel completely comfortable. The sports also, when I would play sports within the gym, feel like I was kind of picked on.
Okay.
So, and I dealt with it because I was big. They didn't really pick on me physically,
right,
but I just didn't feel comfortable. But that's the way it was.
Got it. And you said you moved from the neighborhood to where?
Yeah, Co-op City.
What building?
We were in Building 7.
God.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what was your first impression of co-ops, the year you moved in,
Yeah.
and your first impression.
Yeah. It was wide open space, tall buildings. My building had 33 stories, and we were on 13, which it wasn't too comfortable. Whatever, we dealt with it.
I grew up on the 13th floor too.
Oh, did you?
Did.
Yeah.
With a
In
black
Culver
cat.
City?
No.
No, with a black cat.
With the black cat.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, we didn't have, I was allergic to cats. Yeah, I actually didn't mention my dog. We had a little dog named Muffin when we lived in Co-op City. We lived in Sheridan Avenue, and when we moved, we had to give her away. I was heartbroken.
I bet.
That's
That's a different.
sad memory. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. So what was it?
So the thing that stood out was an open space. I did have George Kilmer Park, yeah, but this was like you walked out the door and there was a gigantic field right behind the house. And, played ball and all kinds of things. And they had nice basketball courts. I played a lot of basketball. I never made it on a team or anything, but I played a lot. The typical schoolyard type basketball that New York City is kind of famous for. Mm-hmm. And they had a set of courts right alongside the garage. They had these gigantic garages where people would park, obviously. And after school, whether it be high school or college, that's where I was. And in the summer, if we didn't go away, because we spent a lot of time in the Catskills in New York State, I was playing basketball. I can remember summers, I think probably 2 summers, where we would get up maybe 9, 10 o'clock, play for an hour or two, and it got too hot. Then we would have lunch or hang out for a while, and then in the afternoon, play the rest of the day, maybe from 3 to 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock, all the time. And I had a back problem, that developed. I didn't get hurt or anything, it just developed, and I had to wear a big brace. And I can remember that brace constantly being sweat through, because I would sweat playing basketball, and having to figure out a way to dry it, because I have to put it back on for the next day or whatever. But played a lot of basketball. But the one thing I also remember about Co-op City is they had these walking paths, and they were also biking paths. So I remember I had a red bike, and I used to ride it around when we lived in Sheridan Avenue. But this was like it was a beautiful path you could go on, and spent a lot of time riding around.
Okay. We're in your old neighborhood back near Yankee Stadium. Were there any gangs noticeable, visible?
No, I wouldn't say no. No.
Got it.
I didn't talk about Yankee Stadium, though, which I need to
talk to me about Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
So I wear my Yankee hat, as you can see.
And your Lehman shirt?
And my Lehman sweatshirt. I went to Lehman for 4 years. But Yankee Stadium, that was my favorite part. Really, my father was a plumber, like I mentioned. He would get home around 4:35. He would come. We would have maybe something to eat and take a shower. And we'd walk over to the stadium, and we'd go in. 50 cents for the bleachers, 75 for general admission, $2.50 for reserved, and $3.50 for box seats, which we never sat in. $3.50, you never spent that kind of money to sit in the seat. Contrasting today, it's...
Because the stadium changed a few times.
Yes.
What year was it that you were visiting?
Okay.
Because you mentioned bleachers.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know the new stadium, no bleachers.
No, there's bleachers.
Are there bleachers?
Yeah, there are bleachers.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the first stadium. This is the one that was built in 1923 for Babe Ruth. And I was going during the 60s and early 70s. In 1975 or 4, they redid the stadium. They used to have the old stadium had these big poles that would hold up the upper deck. And they were crappy because sometimes you want them sitting behind a pole and you're going like this, and you're going like that to try to see the game. So in the mid-70s, they refurbished the stadium, took out the poles. That was a gigantic improvement. And I continued to go to the stadium, even though we had already left in '69 to move to Co-op City, but we would travel. My father would drive, or we would go by bus. He wouldn't go by bus. If I would go by bus, but he would drive. I spent many games there. I mean, in the late 60s, early 70s, the Yankees were not very good. So you could get any seat you wanted, anytime you wanted. But towards the late 70s, they wound up with some good players and pitchers, and they got much better. But to serendipity to wind up living in the Yankees neighborhood, essentially, was because I became a fan, was really fantastic. So that's a very fond memory. It still is. I still go to the Yankee, even though I live in Connecticut now. Take the train. They actually have what's called a Yankee train, which it goes directly. There's a spur now that goes directly to Yankee Stadium, and they're all Yankee fans on the train. So that's kind of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And did you ever go to any shopping areas here in the Bronx with your mother, your parents? Can you talk to us about where and what your experience like Arch Avenue?
Yeah. So the big one that we went to was 161st Street, which was right near Yankee Stadium. I remember there was a grocery store that we went to. I think it was Met Foods. Maybe became Met Foods. I forget the original name. And it's still there. I've been in it because when I go to see the Yankees, I walk around the neighborhood. Still there. We used to go, and probably once a week I would help. I like to help my mom. We used to help her shop and push the cart. She didn't drive. She never drove. And also I remember on 161st Street there was a Bankers Trust that used to go in and do the banking with the old bank books we used to have.
Manufacturers Hanover Trust?
Yeah, I think it might have been later on, but I think it was originally Bankers Trust.
Okay.
And then there was also a deli. I don't remember the name. That's still there. And we used to go in and get something to eat. And my father he liked hot dogs and stuff. We used to go with my father there before the game. Also, there was a soda shop. I think Jan's. That was on 161st Street. We'd go like maybe Fridays or Saturdays, get like a soda or a ice cream soda or a milkshake, that kind of thing. So that was the main shopping. There was also some shopping on 167th Street. There was also a little shop for food. There was a pharmacy. There was what we used to call a Chinese laundry. They used to take my father's shirts there. They used to clean them and press them. And there was also, of course, a candy store that was almost on 160. It was 167th. It was 165th Street, and Sheridan Avenue was a big candy store, Phillies, that we used to go into, and I bought a lot of baseball cards. We used to trade baseball cards. I didn't mention that before, but we traded or we flipped baseball cards. That was very big. And then further down, there's 170th Street. We had some more shopping. We used to go there occasionally. There was also a movie theater, either on 170th or 167th. There was the Kent movie theater. I forget which one. Then the big shopping was on Fordham Road. That's like, and still is, I think, a main shopping area. And the one store we used to go to was Alexander's. That was a big one. I used to go there with my mother a lot. I remember they used to have these sale tables where the clothes just piled up, and the women would just gather around and look through and stuff. And I would be standing there. She would give me something. I would, hold on to it to go pay. And there was also an Alexander's on 3rd Avenue, and she would go. I don't think I ever went to that one, but she would go. I know she would go shopping there also. We also had a bakery, which is also on Sheridan Avenue, a little bit further down. Used to get bagels and rye bread and rolls and pastries. And I remember I would go, would send me to go get some stuff. I would go. I remember it was, for some reason, you kind of walk down to get into it. And there was also a couple other things scattered on Sheridan Avenue, like bodegas and things like that. We would go in to get a soda or something. Yeah.
Got it. You got that Lehman shirt. Talk to us.
Yeah, so Lehman.
Lehman.
Yeah, so I graduated from Taft 1976, and I want to go to college. I wanted to study biology, mainly the environmental element of biology, ecology, that sort of thing. And certainly my father was not going to pay for college. He didn't have any money to do that. So I had to take a loan or go to a free school. So at that time, the City University of New York, which Lehman was a part of, was free. All you had to pay was a $60 registration fee and your books. And luckily, my father's union had scholarships. So I applied for a scholarship. I got it. It was $200 a year, paid for the $60 registration fee and most of the books. So I essentially really went to college for free. And that was the main reason I went there. And plus it was in the Bronx. It was convenient. I mean, from Co-op City, I would take the bus. It was about half the time it would take me to get to Taft, I could get to Lehman. So it was no big deal. It was the same bus. You just got in the same bus.
You didn't have to take the D train.
No, I just took the bus. And then after a while, my father would give me his car. I got a license, so I was driving, and it was a pain to find a spot there. But
It still is.
Yeah, I know. I was there a couple of weeks ago. They had like an alumni basketball game and a little gathering. So I try to continue to support the school because I thought I got a great education for free at that school, and I built a career around it. Like I mentioned, I took my biology degree. I did some for 10 years, almost 10 years. I did studies on the Hudson River with a company who was working for the big power companies on the river. And then eventually I learned computer programming. That's what happened. And then in the pharmaceutical industry, they deal with lots and lots of data. So that became kind of my thing. And I wound up moving up the ladder. I wound up managing a global group of people who were doing the same sort of thing, managing data for pharmaceutical clinical trials to determine whether drugs are safe and effective. But yeah, Lehman, I studied biology, ecology, sociology. I tried out for the basketball team. I got hurt during the tryout, so that was the end of my career. And yeah, I thought it was, I can remember some of the professors, Dr. Joseph Racklin. I think he's still there. He's an older guy, obviously. But I took his ichthyology course, which is studying fish, and some ecology courses. We went out on field trips. I remember a Dr. Held, and he was microbiology, and a Dr. Keithley, she was invertebrates. Had good, students that I worked with. We had a good time. Didn't really socialize afterwards, to be honest. But while I was there, I enjoyed the time with the students, other students, and I spent a lot of time in the library, doing research or whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was both my high school years, even though at the end it wasn't that comfortable, but the college years were really good years.
All right. Was there anything about the Bronx that I haven't asked you and you'd like to give us your memory on?
No, I wanted to make sure I included Yankee Stadium, which of course that was a highlight. No, but the one thing I want to say is overall, growing up in the urban environment and experiencing both the really urban, which is Sheridan Avenue, and then Co-op City, which is a little bit different, it was just great. I have so many fond memories, which is one of the reasons I'm here today. I wanted to share that with you, Pastor, and anybody else who's going to watch this video. I hope they really understand that the Bronx was really a wonderful place to grow up, and it gave me a great foundation, to become an adult and, have a family, et cetera, et cetera. So awesome. I think I covered everything.
We like to end all of our interviews by asking one question.
Yeah.
What does the Bronx mean to you?
The Bronx means foundation. It really does, because, like I mentioned before, it is, and it's persisted, and as the foundation of my life. And I've said to my wife many times, I want to move back. I'm halfway joking, halfway not. And I know there's been a lot of gentrification and people have moved into the Bronx, but I know it's something that will never happen, but in my mind, I'm happy to feel like I still want to go back. I still want to live here. I like the diversity, even though, like I said before, sometimes it's not that comfortable, but I like the diversity, and I feel comfortable in diversity even today. And, when I go on traveling, because I do a lot of traveling, I like when there's a lot of different people around. I feel comfortable, and so other people may not as adults. So the word I would use is really foundation of my life, and being able to build upon that and reflect upon it. It makes me feel good when I think about the way I grew up. It's a good feeling overall. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. That was Gary Drucker for the Bronx County Historical Society's Oral History Projects. Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.